Greetings from Costa Rica, folks. I hope you're doing well. My name is Matt Rosenstiel. I'm co-owner broker of Coldwell Banker Pacific Realty, based here in gorgeous Playa Junquial, which is just south of Playa Tamarindo here in Guanacaste, Costa Rica. And today, as I do on every Thursday at noon, we have our live Costa Rica real estate chat with our topic today being getting your money into Costa Rica. And this is a question that's been coming up more and more as people look to invest down here. And it's a difficult question to tackle because, quite frankly, folks, as we will discuss, Costa Rica has one of the most uncooperative, difficult banking apparatuses that I think you'd find almost anywhere in the world. It's one of the frequent sources of complaints that expats have in moving here. You've got difficulties with enormous bureaucracy. You have all kinds of oversight for international money transfers. And frankly, bringing any amount of money down to Costa Rica can be a somewhat difficult task. So today we'll talk first and foremost about that banking culture and some of the things that make Costa Rica this difficult place to do banking. Second, we'll talk about how you can get your money to Costa Rica for a real estate transaction. And finally, we'll talk more generally about bringing your money down here for your operating expenses once you own a property in Costa Rica. Again, my name is Matt Rosenstiel. Thanks very much for joining me today, and stay tuned. Good afternoon, and thank you for joining me for my chat today about bringing your money to Costa Rica, whether it's from the US, Canada, or Europe. And first and foremost, I wanted to cover some of the banking culture and sort of what makes Costa Rica a difficult place to bring your money. It's important to understand that when you hear Costa Rica's sort of the Switzerland of Central America, or really this paradise and oasis in Central America, one of the reasons that they've been able to achieve that status, and one of the big reasons for the country's prosperity, is that they've always had really good, solid economic ties and other relationships with the United States of America. Unlike other Central and South American countries, Costa Rica has never been invaded by the US, and to a large extent, whenever the US wants Costa Rica to adopt certain policies, generally speaking, you see that Costa Rica tends to follow suit. Now, this wasn't necessarily the case in 2007 when the US was promoting CAFTA. In fact, the Costa Rica referendum on CAFTA was extremely narrow. I think it was like 51% to the high 48% or somewhere in that neck of the woods. But Costa Rica did vote to ratify CAFTA in 2007, and Costa Rica also signed a tax compliance treaty with the United States of America in 2013. That was called the Foreign Account Tax Compliance Treaty. Again, it was signed in 2013, and it came into force in 2019. Throughout its history in being compliant with the US, Costa Rica has been overbearingly willing to share information, and specifically with the Foreign Account Tax Compliance Treaty that was related to FATCA, the Foreign Account Tax Compliance Act in the United States. Costa Rica promises to divulge information of US taxpayers, and therefore needs to collect a ton of information for US taxpayers. And along the way, I'm sure that they've also volunteered, or rather agreed with the United States to do everything in their power to stop money laundering. So money laundering, because it's a Central American country, is a problem here, though I can't imagine how anybody deals with the banks here to launder money. I don't think anyone would actually choose that fate. But anyhow, because Costa Rica is a developing country where a government doesn't have the resource to enforce anti-money laundering laws or to really control banks, yes, you get those issues. And the Costa Rica banking system, in order to combat money laundering and really try to be as cooperative with US law enforcement as possible, they have a ton of onerous requirements that foreigners have to do to fulfill to bank here, or especially to bring money into Costa Rica. So, for example, if you want to bring a large sum of cash down to Costa Rica, you will frequently be asked to provide tax returns and even bank account statements from your personal US accounts to demonstrate that the money both has a legal origin, that you've paid taxes, and that you're a legal business in the United States. And they're also going to want to see that your account was the source of those funds that came down to Costa Rica. So anyhow, here in Costa Rica, there's a national entity called SUGEF, SUGEF, and I'll put that up there so you can see. It's a long acronym in Spanish, but essentially they are the financial oversight entity in the national government, and they control banks, real estate companies, or rather they have oversight over almost any entity in Costa Rica that is involved in international money transfers or in the financial system here in the country. SUGEF is absolutely overbearing in what they require in order to bring funds into the country. So let's first talk about when you're looking to purchase real estate here and you need to get your money into the country. First and foremost, you should exclusively be working with an escrow service and a recognized escrow service with a very long reputation for the funds in your transaction. Obviously, they're a third-party neutral actor that holds your money for you and releases at closing your funds to the correct parties. Some of the escrow services here in Costa Rica that are particularly popular are Geldstuck Escrow Service. Another one is STLA, which used to be Stewart Title and is now Secure Title Latin America. And you do see a variety of other providers, but honestly, Geldstuck and STLA are two of the providers with whom I've done the most business recently, and two of the ones that I think most realtors would agree have a spectacular reputation. Your escrow provider, and this is a key question to answer early in your transaction, they should understand where the seller of that real estate is going to receive their proceeds. Because if the seller is going to receive the proceeds from their sale in the US or Canada, then you, as somebody buying real estate, has the option to never bring this money down to Costa Rica or to a Costa Rica account. If both buyer and seller agree, you can use a United States or Canada escrow account in order to avoid all the hassle of bringing your money down to Costa Rica. So ironically, you're seeing a huge number of Costa Rica real estate transactions these days where if the seller is in the United States and that's where they're going to receive their funds, rather than working with one of the Costa Rica providers, lots of people are working with US escrow companies. There's a huge number. One of the most popular that you see a lot of people working with is TLA, not to be confused with STLA, but TLA is actually it's an internationally based affiliate. You know, they have several branches, but they have accounts in the US. And because Costa Rica has such strict oversight rules to bring funds down here, you can just financially manage your real estate transaction through a US account and avoid a huge amount of that hassle. If your seller is going to receive the proceeds from the sale in Costa Rica, then absolutely you're going to have to bring your money down here. And like I said, your escrow provider here in Costa Rica is going to request tax returns plus bank statements, essentially showing that, first of all, the origin of the funds is your legal business or income, and that the originating account is something that's in your name and that you were actually the source of funds. It can sound utterly crazy to foreigners who want to purchase real estate here that that's necessary. And I have to say, yes, it makes business here a lot harder, but don't be surprised by this requirement if your seller is going to receive their funds here in Costa Rica. One interesting question, you still will be able to apply for residency under the investor status program where you invest $150,000, even if you use US or Canadian escrow to complete your real estate transaction. For that residency process, the Costa Rica government just wants to see that, yes, you invested $150,000 in real property here. They don't have to actually see that money come to a Costa Rica bank account in order for you to successfully get your residency in that program. So you're seeing a ton of people avoid the hassle of Costa Rica escrow and go with a United States account because the requirements there are far, far less. It's kind of very ironic that this anti-money laundering effort by the US has created such rigid oversight of Costa Rica banking that now we're just opening US accounts and using them because in the US, you can receive millions of dollars into one of these accounts held by an escrow company with only the identification and a simple know your client form filled out. So that's all a US escrow service needs in order to operate legally. And so you're seeing many realtors in those situations where the funds are staying in the US switch to a US provider. Now, you also have to realize if a large amount of money eventually needs to come to Costa Rica for your real estate transaction, if you're paying the closing costs and that's over $10,000, you may have to use Costa Rica escrow, even though the seller's receiving the proceeds in the United States or Canada, because eventually those closing costs are going to have to be covered here in Costa Rica. And we have had situations where you close a real estate deal, the costs are in a US escrow account, and they get frozen by the Costa Rica bank when the United States escrow company sends them down here. So anyhow, you may end up stuck with Costa Rica escrow one way or the other. And if you do, be prepared to fork over a good amount of supporting documentation for the origin of funds. Next, let's talk about bringing your money down to Costa Rica for your day-to-day operating expenses. And here, I'm afraid to say, the only advice I can give you is to be extremely patient and prepare for working with what can be a very bureaucratic and complicated banking system. I typically recommend that my clients open accounts with one of the large national banks, which are Banco Nacional de Costa Rica and Banco de Costa Rica. One is BNCR and the other is BCR, solely because they have the most branches, ATMs, etc. And really that can make life easiest here, considering you do need to go to the bank fairly often for different issues here compared to the US. I know that retail banking there and bank branches themselves are very much dying off in other parts of the world, but here in Costa Rica, the bank is a cathedral of what would it be? A cathedral to time wasting and paper pushing, where any simple process that you try to engage in, when you create your account, for example, you can expect to sit with the teller creating your account for 4 hours, that kind of timeline, for them to fill out all of the paperwork. You'll see them go through several stacks of absolutely huge numbers of forms, all kinds of different things that they have to get up and leave the desk for. And literally, you can plan to spend a half day in the bank opening your account. You'll have to go back a week later to pick up your card. You have to wait in line to get your banking card just like everybody else. And that could take up to 3 hours again if you get there on a bad day. So one of my top pieces of advice for people in banking in Costa Rica, first, is to find those wonderful moments where the bank has almost no line, and plan your trips to the bank around those Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursdays that really tend to not have people conducting business at the bank. Second, if you have any connection to a property manager or somebody locally who is willing to help you with the process of getting started in banking, I think it is absolutely worth hundreds, if not thousands of dollars to pay someone to help hold your hand through this process. When you open your first bank account here in Costa Rica, it's going to be severely limited, unfortunately. They have really strict rules in setting up accounts where foreigners are the ones controlling it. Excuse me. And usually you will see that a checking account opened by foreigners will initially have no connection to intra-bank payment systems, online banking, and a number of other tools. They will also have you submit a cash flow as a projection for what the account will need or what the account will handle when you go into the bank. These cash flow things are very interesting. It's a document you get from a registered public accountant here in Costa Rica, and you can get that accountant to write virtually anything on the projected cash flow. You can say, I'm going to need $10,000 a month coming in and out of this account. And an accountant, generally speaking, will just write that into your cash flow, and it's fine. However, when you take that document to your bank teller and say, I need an account with a $10,000 monthly cash flow limit, 9 times out of 10, the teller is going to be forced to give you an account with a $1,000 or $1,500 monthly limit. The only way to get this limit up can literally be with time to generate more cash flow in the account. And as you start bringing in chunks of money, you can expect that while you're pushing the limit of your financial portfolio or your profile on the account, every time you try to jump up, let's say you've got a $2,000 monthly limit on your account, and you send $5,000 3 months in a row, you will likely get a call from your friendly bank representative asking you to come in with either a new cash flow projection or documentation to justify this new cash flow. Now, here's where, I actually butted my head against this wall and felt, the first time this happened to me, I threw a big fit and tried to do everything possible to avoid presenting this documentation. But what I really didn't think about was the fact that these bank tellers and customer service representatives are really just trying to tick a box in their electronic system. And to be honest, they really don't care if what you're submitting is absolutely foolproof, thorough evidence of every cent that's come into your account. They have to put these forms into the system because that's what the system requires. They will send you contact and say, hey, come stop by and we need this or that or the other. And Don't pull a Mateo and freak out about it. Get your documents together, visit that public accountant, print out some bank statements, do what you need to go back in and show them. Uh, Lots of times they will ask you to provide your Costa Rica tax documents. If, for example, you say your property is an Airbnb and that's why I've got all this money coming in, they're going to want to see that you're paying your your taxes on that income as justification for it coming into your account. So anyhow, really, again, it can sound quite crazy to people who have not dealt with this before, but as you start to bring chunks of money down to Costa Rica, it can be best to anticipate these problems and even go into your bank preemptively, present them with information about, I'm bringing down $50,000 to build a garage. Who knows? Maybe they'll accept the signed building contract with that $50,000 number there. Whatever you do, you might want to go in there first, sit down with your platform representative, as they call the customer service people here in Banco Nacional and Banco de Costa Rica, give them the documents ahead of time and, ensure that when the money comes, perhaps you're able to solve things just over the phone rather than going back into the bank. My final tip that I'll give you, in every town, we're talking about these bank tellers as human beings. They all have friends and they all have family. You frequently find that banks have accountants that have very good relationships with the tellers themselves. And you can find these social connections where if you've got an accountant that has a strong relationship with a certain bank, it can be worth choosing that bank over others simply because the accountant might be someone who is able to send documents directly to the bank on your behalf in the future. We've found in our area that by establishing a good relationship with our accountant, who has a very strong relationship with the bank, we've been able to save ourselves probably on the order of 40 or 50 hours of bank line waiting time, because we can call our accountant and say, hey, they need this document over at the bank. Could you make sure that gets submitted this afternoon? And he'll handle it. Thanks as always for joining me, folks. Again, my name is Matt Rosensteel. You can email me at matt@cbtamarindo.com. I am a realtor focused on the Tamarindo area here in Western Guanacaste, Costa Rica. I'm trying to look for where I can put my email address up on the screen, but I'm not seeing it currently. And so we'll say goodbye until next week. See you Thursday, December 22nd, right at noon. We will be talking about the future of Costa Rica real estate, not just in 2023, but years and years beyond, how you will be experiencing beautiful real estate here in a different way. Again, thanks very much for joining me and have a good one.